very good evening. Welcome to Brussels. So, the EU summit on Brexit will go ahead tomorrow, despite the last-minute brinkmanship by the Spanish Prime Minister, who was seeking assurances on Gibraltar. Those assurances came this afternoon in the shape of a letter from the British ambassador to the EU, Sir Tim Barrow, who made it clear, if it wasn't already clear, that the issue of Gibraltar will be dealt with separately to the deal the EU strikes with the UK, and it will be an issue for bilateral negotiation. There is concern in some British newspapers tonight that Theresa May has given ground on Gibraltar. In reality, all she's done is specify what is already there in the terms of the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, a point she was making clear after her meeting here tonight with Jean-Claude Juncker.
Well, let me just say a word about the position regarding Gibraltar. We have worked through the withdrawal issues for Gibraltar with Spain in a constructive and sensible way, and I'd like to pay tribute to the statesmanship with which Fabian Casado has led the negotiations on behalf of Gibraltar. We have ensured that Gibraltar is covered by the whole withdrawal agreement and by the implementation period, and we will always negotiate on behalf of the whole UK family, including Gibraltar. And in the future relationship, we will stand up for their interests. And the UK's position on the sovereignty of Gibraltar has not changed and will not change. I'm proud that Gibraltar is British, and I will always stand by Gibraltar.
Prime Minister, you have the Spanish Foreign Minister claiming the greatest diplomatic victory on this since the Treaty of Utrecht. You have still some action as regards fishing and basing quotas on existing plans. Is the danger that in trying to please some Remain voters and some Leave voters sort of disappearing down the middle?
No, the UK's position on Gibraltar has not changed and will not change. We have negotiated on behalf of Gibraltar. We've ensured that they are covered by the whole withdrawal agreement and by the implementation period, and in the future we will continue to negotiate on behalf of the whole UK family, and that includes Gibraltar. I'm proud that Gibraltar is British. I will always stand by Gibraltar. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Yes, but as we were saying, the Spanish Prime Minister has claimed this as a victory. We should bear in mind, of course, that we are a week from elections in Spain, in southern Spain, and in the area bordering Gibraltar. And so the Spanish Prime Minister has a political motive here to make Gibraltar an issue. But he did keep them sweating until the last few hours. He was on his way back from Havana this afternoon, and when he landed in Madrid, this is what he had to say.
I've just told the King that Spain has reached an agreement on Gibraltar. The first thing I want to say is that consequently the European Council will take place tomorrow, and the second is that Europe and the UK have accepted the conditions set down by Spain. Because of this, Spain will lift its veto and will vote tomorrow in favour of Brexit.
You will get argument on both sides about what he's achieved here. Probably nothing more than was already in the documents, as I say, but it does highlight a vulnerability that was created by Brexit when it comes to Gibraltar. So Theresa May goes from here, the Berlaymont building where she's been meeting the European Commission President this evening, to a meeting with Donald Tusk, the European Council President. He tweeted this afternoon, once he got this agreement from the Spanish Prime Minister to go ahead, that he's going to recommend they approve on Sunday the outcome of the Brexit negotiations. No one has reasons to be happy, he says, but at least at this critical time, the EU 27 has passed the test of unity and solidarity. And he also went on to say in that letter that as far as he was concerned, no side had won in the negotiation. Well, let's pick up a little bit of what has happened today with Adam Fleming, our Europe correspondent, who was with me a little earlier, and I asked him whether, in his view, the Spanish had got anything out of the ordinary this evening.
This was an exercise in reassuring the Spanish that their argument, which was that the withdrawal agreement as it is now would somehow mean that the future relationship between the UK and the EU after Brexit would automatically apply to Gibraltar. And he's got a reconfirmation written in black and white that the Spanish government will have a say over how that final future relationship is applied in Gibraltar, which is effectively what they had before. But Pedro Sanchez has a piece of paper he can wave in the Andalusian elections, which are coming up in the next few days' time. And also you can, if you're the Spanish foreign minister, you can send a tweet saying this is the biggest thing to happen to Gibraltar since the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which I think the British would say is a bit over the top for a restatement of their existing position.
It works a week ahead of elections. We're just seeing these pictures of Theresa May going into the meeting with Jean-Claude Juncker this evening. What is it that she's here to discuss?
She's definitely not here to negotiate, because the two bits of the Brexit package, the withdrawal agreement, the 585-page divorce treaty, and the political declaration, the 26-page outline of what the future might look like, those documents are sealed. They were zipped shut effectively yesterday. EU officials. So she's not negotiating. I think this is going to be talking about how tomorrow can be a springboard to the next part of the process, which is the Brexit package being ratified, first in the British Parliament and then in the European Parliament. But this is a moment of history. It's a moment of political theatre, because the leaders didn't have to do this. They didn't have to traipse here tomorrow and have this sombre ceremony to endorse the document. Legally, they're not obliged to do that. Yes. But I'm glad they are.
And important for those correspondents who've been following this process for 20 months, of course, as well. Just the format tomorrow, when they get these documents in front of them, will they vote on them?
No, there's no vote. And in terms of the choreography, what will happen is they'll all arrive at the 27th, that is, walk the red carpet as they always do for an EU summit. We'll try and catch them out, or at least get them to say something, a soundbite that's historic for the news. Then there'll be a meeting for half an hour with the European Parliament President, Antonio Tajani. Remember, the European Parliament has to give their consent to the final package. Then the 27 will spend an hour together. They'll agree a separate side document that I've had a look at, and I think will spell out 7 areas of vigilance that they will keep an eye on as the talks progress in the next phase. Then Theresa May will be ushered in for a maximum of an hour. Then we're expecting a press conference with Presidents Tusk and Juncker at midday Brussels time tomorrow, so well before Sunday lunch, where the whole thing will be wrapped up, and that'll be it.
Yes, we're not expecting any hiccups tomorrow. Adam Fleming there, who will be with me when we get to the event tomorrow. It starts at 9:30 in the morning, but there's no vote. This is really passing the documents through to the next stage, the ratification in the European Parliament and the ratification in the House of Commons, if it comes to that, of course. And there is still huge concern here in Brussels that Theresa May is not going to get the votes to pass the withdrawal agreement. Arlene Foster, the leader of the DUP, has been hosting her annual conference in Belfast today. Ahead of that, she'd been speaking to the Times newspaper, in which she seemed to indicate she would prefer Jeremy Corbyn in power than to agree a deal which she thinks would separate Northern Ireland from the rest of Great Britain. Emma Vardy, our Ireland correspondent, has been at the conference today and sent this report.
It's the most closely watched conference in the party's history. Northern Ireland's DUP, whose support the government depends on, are poised to vote down Theresa May's draft Brexit deal.
For this draft agreement fails her own key commitments. The Prime Minister has not been able to guarantee an outcome that eliminates the risk of the introduction of the so-called backstop arrangements. Now, on the one hand, we're told that the backstop would be the best of both worlds. And on the other hand, we're told we're not going to need the backstop.
And on this plan to avoid a hard Irish border, they're not backing down.
Bin the backstop.
And look who's become an ally. Boris Johnson in Belfast to lend his support. It's the DUP's confidence and supply agreement, he said, keeping Jeremy Corbyn out of Downing Street.
It is absolutely vital that we keep this partnership going, and we keep this confidence and supply arrangement going, and that we are not so complacent as to abandon the government of this country to a man whose avowed policy is to break up this country.
If the backstop is used, Northern Ireland would remain fixed to EU rules, even after the rest of the UK goes its own way. Many Northern Ireland businesses are supporting the deal, putting them at odds with the DUP, who insist it undermines the integrity of the UK.
Well, I think that's an argument that no one in the business community in Northern Ireland accepts. It's very seldom in Northern Ireland you see unanimity about anything, but when you find that every single business organisation is telling you something different, then I think the DUP should take cognizance of that.
Well, never before has this party been so centre stage. They've been fired up by Boris and know they have the backing of the Brexiteers in Westminster. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
Yeah, and listening to those comments from Arlene Foster, it really does underline this problem within the document for the DUP, that there is within the Conservative Party as well this desire for greater sovereignty mixed in with this desire to keep the integrity of the United Kingdom, and the two things are clashing all the time, and that is why they're finding it very difficult to get behind the document. So let's pick up a bit of that with Valentina Popp, who is the Europe correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. And they may well pass this document, these two documents through tomorrow, but they know there's a much bigger hurdle ahead.
They know this is just the beginning of the road, really. It's not at all the end, and they know what kind of problems Ms May faces back home. They were trying to accommodate her as much as possible in the political declaration and annexed to this withdrawal treaty, but they know that at the end of the day, if the whole deal falls through the Parliament, all bets are off and nobody has any idea how to proceed forward.
We've seen that sort of support, haven't we, from Michel Barnier in the way that he talked about the deal last week, and then we've seen it again today from Donald Tusk saying no one has won here, this is a sad day, it's nothing to celebrate, but it's a good deal for everybody. They're trying. I'm looking at the calendar of events over the next few weeks, so you've got the vote in the House of Commons probably the 10th, 11th, 12th of December, and then straight after that a summit back here in Brussels. What might happen then? Which
will probably be dominated again by Brexit if the deal falls through the Parliament, and then the only thing leaders at this point can do is to accelerate the contingencies for a no deal scenario and wait for the British government to make its position clear. Will it be still Theresa May? Will they want to renegotiate? What will they want to renegotiate? All that probably will only happen in January.
Yeah. Today, this sort of issue with Spain and the way that it nearly brought the summit down is really a marker of what's to come, isn't it? Because the other side of Brexit, you're going to have all manner of countries coming forward with their own national issues, speaking to their own publics at home.
Absolutely, that is the risk if the withdrawal treaty is reopened. If by some miracle Ms May stays in power after the deal being voted down and she's forced to renegotiate the deal, of course all these issues will re-emerge. France will push for a level playing field, Denmark and other fishery nations will push for a better fisheries deal, and all of that. It's all a Pandora's box if the vote falls through the Parliament.
Valentina Popp, grateful for your time. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, it is worth reiterating, of course, that the DUP has those 10 votes. There is a supply and confidence agreement with the Conservative Party at the moment, but if they take those 10 MPs away, and also those Conservatives that are sworn to vote against the withdrawal agreement, then you do see a very difficult path ahead for the Prime Minister, and they will be acutely aware of that here in Brussels this evening as they talk to Theresa May. Back to you in the studio.
Christian, thank you very much. Thank you. The time is 6:15. Time for the headlines here on BBC News. Theresa May, the EU says it's ready to sign the Brexit withdrawal agreement. In Belfast, the DUP renews its attack on the deal, saying it could separate Northern Ireland from Britain. Film director Nicholas Roeg, whose credits include Don't Look Now and The Man Who Fell to Earth, has died at the age of 90. OK, let's get more now on our main story. And European Council President Donald Tusk has recommended that the EU approve the Brexit deal at a summit on Sunday. It comes after the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, received assurances from the UK government over Gibraltar and dropped his threat to the summit. Meanwhile, Arlene Foster, leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, has told its annual conference in Belfast that the Prime Minister should try to get a better deal that's better for Northern Ireland. OK, let's speak to Stephen Kelly, CEO of Manufacturing Northern Ireland, who was part of a delegation of Northern Irish business leaders who met the Prime Minister to discuss the withdrawal agreement earlier this week. First off, your analysis of what Arlene Foster had to say.
Well, we had quite an interesting week here in Northern Ireland where business stepped into the political arena a bit more than we perhaps would have liked to. That resulted in some mudslinging, some people would describe it as, but we very much welcome the tone, not just from Arlene Foster, but from Nigel Dodds and others today at the conference, which clearly means that they're trying to reach out and really discuss the issues that business have. And the worry that we have that we face either this deal or no deal.
Well, Arlene Foster was saying that she wants to ensure that the border, Northern Ireland, the border, does not become divergent. What do you understand by that?
Well, the big concern is that if, and it's a big if, Northern Ireland slipped into the backstop, then there's the potential for divergence between the rest of the UK and Northern Ireland. And at that point, there would be a widening of a gap period between the UK economy and the Northern Ireland economy. Now, when we met with the Prime Minister, she made it clear that she didn't want to do anything that would damage the Northern Ireland economy, didn't want to do anything that would damage the economy of the whole of the United Kingdom. And she did assure us that that position of diverging in the rest of the UK and Northern Ireland staying alongside EU rules just wouldn't materialise.
So what are your members then saying about this deal?
Our members are very supportive of the deal. We've surveyed them all week. We're sitting now with 94.2% support for accepting the withdrawal agreement, as opposed to the other option, which is on the table, which is no deal at all. OK, what does your Northern Ireland business make of this extended, the idea of the extended transition period? Well, we would accept that if that's where we ended up. What we need to do is avoid at all costs a no-deal Brexit. Some analysis that your colleagues in BBC Northern Ireland have uncovered shows that in the backstop, there are pains, there's no doubt about that, but a no-deal Brexit has a 10 times greater impact on the Northern Ireland economy, taking £1.5 billion out of the small economy as ours. And if you take £1.5 billion out of a small economy just like Northern Ireland's, then there has to be damage. There has to be damage to jobs and damage to those businesses, and we need to avoid that as best possible.
Are you concerned by the upcoming vote in Parliament? What would your message be to the DUP?
Well, the message just isn't to the 10 DUP members, but the other members of Parliament. There's 650 of them in total. I don't think anybody in the country wants to see a situation that the country has been economically damaged. But the one guaranteed way of doing that is to have a no-deal Brexit.
OK. Stephen Kelly, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, police in Paris have used tear gas and water cannon to disperse protesters demonstrating for a second weekend running against a planned rise in fuel tax. Clashes broke out on the Champs-Élysées as demonstrators tried to get through a security cordon protecting key buildings. Over the past year, the price of diesel, which is used in most French cars, has risen by around 23%. Here's our Paris correspondent, Lucy Williamson.
This a reminder for France's president. Sparks can quickly ignite into flames. The Champs-Élysées, not a tourist site today, but an unofficial battleground. Protesters armed with paving stones, pushed back by tear gas, water cannon, riot police. This movement is about more than fuel prices. Its supporters tired of taxes, tired of politicians. Their slogans threatening revolution. The French authorities, a joke to some.
We have to pay for rent, food, insurances and telephone. What's left at the end of the month? Nothing. I don't want Macron to just cut taxes, I want him to resign.
Why is it always the little taxpayer who has to pay? We've been tightening our belts for 30 years. If it gets any tighter, we're going to explode.
The government banned protesters from this street today, pointing them to the Eiffel Tower instead. The far-right leader Marine Le Pen questioned why. The government says she's encouraging dissent.
Les lanceurs d'eau, vous avez pu le voir, l'usage.
We are using
guns and tear gas to push back the assailants. The ultra-right is mobilized and has answered Marine Le Pen's call. They want to attack institutions. They want to attack governing MPs.
The government said no protests on this street, and look what happened. They say ultra-right elements are responsible for the violence here, but many ordinary people say they also support this movement. This protest has brought together people from all political backgrounds, all parts of France. But it's a movement with no national leader, no formal structure. Its membership and its identity hard to control. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
A man has died after being stabbed in East London. Police have launched a murder investigation following the attack in Hackney earlier this morning. Detectives are also questioning a man after an officer was stabbed outside Ilford train station in East London last night. The officer's injuries aren't thought to be life-threatening. Finally, British film director Nicholas Roeg has died at the age of 90. In a career spanning 6 decades, he was celebrated for his original style of filmmaking. His 1973 psychological thriller, Don't Look Now, caused controversy at the time for its graphic sex scenes. Roeg also directed Mick Jagger and James Fox in the crime drama Performance and David Bowie in the science fiction movie The Man Who Fell to Earth. OK, let's speak now to Nick James, editor of the British Film Institute's magazine Sight and Sound. Just how are you feeling, having received this news today?
It's incredibly sad. This man was the greatest living British film director around. He had the visual style that none of his compatriots really had. All of those films that you just mentioned have the most vivid scenes that you could possibly conceive of. We never saw the Australian outback the way we do in his film about. You know, the performance was such a wonderful melding of the pop world and the gangster world. Don't Look Now has the most astonishing beginning where the child is drowned and this incredible ending, which is a fantastic montage of all kinds of different imaginative images. He was easily our most imaginative British filmmaker. And in the 70s and 80s, he had a run of about 7 or 8 films, which was just astonishing because each one was very different from each other and all of them were brilliant.
Have you ever met him, Nick?
Yeah, I did. I've met him a few times, and he was a very genial, kind of great storyteller. And if you sat up, I did sit up drinking with him once, and telling stories into the night. And he was a great raconteur, and a very genial, very gentle kind of person, much loved by everybody in the film industry.
I was going to say, what was he like to work with? How did he work with those actors to get what he wanted coming through the lens?
I think he was one of those people who was a great collaborator. One of the things that people forget is that he had already been working in the film industry for 20 years before he became a director. So he knew the whole thing from the ground up, all the technical stuff. So as far as actors were concerned, he would have seen them from all sides and known how best to treat them, how best to get the performances out of them. It's really quite something, because in all of his films, the acting is astonishing.
I'd like to know what you think his impact on the industry was, and also, which piece of work was he proud of?
I'm not sure which he was most proud of. I know that he was someone who always tried to look to the future, so that if you belaboured him with his track record and how brilliant it was, he would always be saying, well, it's the next film I care about. And I think that's characteristic of somebody who always wanted to be creative to the last, and he was.
OK, Nick, we'll leave it there. Nick James, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Now, a US government report has warned that climate change will cost America hundreds of billions of dollars and damage human health if no action is taken. President Trump has repeatedly cast doubt on the reality of climate change. Our correspondent James Cook has more.
This, say many scientists, is what climate change looks like. In recent years, California has seen bigger, deadlier and more destructive wildfires than ever before. During a cold snap in Washington this week, President Trump tweeted, "Whatever happened to global warming?" Now, his own government experts have answered the question. It's here, they say. Its effects are serious, and without dramatic change, they will be catastrophic. Already, says the report, more frequent and intense storms, like Hurricane Harvey, which ravaged Houston in Texas, are destroying property and may damage critical infrastructure, such as bridges, power plants and oil refineries. Crop yields and labour productivity will decline. There will be a rise in the spread of tropical disease. The poorest Americans will be hardest hit.
One of the things that's quite striking about the report, for example, is that we could see a future where the southeastern parts of the United States experience forest fire seasons that look like what happens in the West right now.
The scientists say substantial and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions are essential, and they do report some progress. Without major urgent action, says the report, the impacts of climate change will soon cascade into every corner of American life. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Hundreds of environmental activists have taken part in a demonstration in Parliament Square in Westminster. As part of the event, organised by the group Extinction Rebellion, protesters were urged to wear funeral clothing and bring wreaths to symbolise what campaigners see as the threat to the planet's future. Demonstrations were also held at the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, as well as in Manchester, North Wales and Sheffield. The destruction of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil has reached its highest level in a decade, driven mainly by illegal logging and the planting of crops. Satellite images show that 3,000 square miles of forest was cleared in the year to July, up nearly 14% on the previous year. Environmentalists say deforestation is one of the main causes of global warming. Now, hundreds of people have attended the funeral of the well-known Syrian radio host and activist Raed Fares, who was killed by gunmen in the rebel-held province of Idlib. Mr. Fares founded an independent radio station broadcasting from opposition-held areas. Despite several assassination attempts, he refused to leave Idlib and continued to defy both the government and the militants. And when Fresh Radio was ordered to remove its female presenters, he used software to disguise their voices. Tributes to Fares have been paid from across the world. OK, weather time now. Here's Thomas Schaffenacker.
Well, it's not been a great day in the south of the UK today. We had the cloudy, dreary, rainy weather. That's going to hang around for a time through this evening, hugging the southern counties here. Also a few showers for the north and east. But generally speaking, the night's actually going to be dry across most of the UK with some clear spells, just a touch of frost here and there. But I think most major towns and cities will see temperatures well above freezing, say around 3 to 6 degrees Celsius. Now tomorrow, a better day in the south. There'll be brighter weather around, although at times it will still be quite cloudy. A few showers there across the northeast once again, and the best of the weather once again across these western areas. Now you can see the winds are blowing out of the east, an easterly wind, so that means the air is coming out of the continent, and that means it's going to be chilly once again. Temperatures around single figures. It will be warming up in the next few days, but it will be turning wetter and windier as well.
Dynasties continues with Lions.
Tomorrow at 8 on BBC One.
Hello, this is BBC News with Loquessa Vera. The headlines. Theresa May has arrived in Brussels ahead of tomorrow's summit to approve her Brexit deal. The Spanish Prime Minister says Britain has given him assurances over the future of Gibraltar. Ms May insists she'll always stand by the territory.
The UK's position on the sovereignty of Gibraltar has not changed and will not change. I'm proud that Gibraltar is British, and I will always stand by Gibraltar.
In Belfast, a leader of the DUP, Arlene Foster, attacks the deal, saying it would create differences between Northern Ireland and Britain. And French police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse protesters in Paris who are demonstrating for a second week now against rising fuel prices. Now on BBC News, it's Sports Day.